Strike up the band so you can give your kids a helping hand.
Hey, this is James Devine with the Music Ed Podcast, and today I'm going to give you 4 tips for assessment and feedback. Tip number 1, formative versus summative. These are just a bunch of fancy words you hear people in education use a lot. Formative assessment just means kind of when you're rotating in the room, you're listening, you're giving some immediate feedback to students. This is what we do. This is what we do in our field. And then summative assessment, if you think about basically a test like you might have in another class, and you have these in band as well. So a summative assessment would be, hey, we're playing the concert B-flat scale next week. You're going to play it for me. So it's usually a specific date and a specific thing that you're listening to. Tip number 2, individual versus ensemble. So through playing tests, you are evaluating students' technique, their tone quality, their tuning, their expression as they become a little bit more advanced. But in the ensemble, you're mainly evaluating balance, blend, dynamics, style. And what I mean by some of those things, dynamics is an obvious one. Balance, how the individual instruments and sections, how they compare to each other, because you might have the clarinets could play a part perfectly and the trumpets could play it perfectly, and maybe you have 3 trumpets and 3 clarinets. It's going to be hard to get balance. You have to teach that to the students, how to listen to that. And then blending the parts. So what I like to tell the students for blend is that I don't want to hear a clarinet and a trumpet. I want to hear a new instrument called the tralanet or something, traranet. I combine the 2 instruments. So I want you to listen to the people on either side of you and blend those sounds together so we get a brand new instrument. Now, as far as the style, what we're listening for in that is you could have the flutes could play staccato properly, the baritones could play staccato properly, but if they're not matching that style, if one group is playing them at about 50% long and then another group is playing them about 75% long, there needs to be an agreement with somewhere in the middle with that, or we can pick out a student that we think is doing it correctly and point out what that student is doing. As you're doing these evaluations, individual versus ensemble, be clear. For example, if you had a B-flat scale test, then you might want to say, okay, on such and such date, we're going to play the concert B-flat scale. You're going to play it as half notes. You're going to play it by memory. You need to have 0 wrong notes on your first try and don't repeat the top note. And then that makes it a little bit clear what you're looking for. For an ensemble, I like to use the large group rubric. What I do with this is I blow it up to a huge poster size, I laminate it, and then we use that quite a bit. Either I'm pointing to it and talking about some of the different descriptors on there, because in my state of Colorado, for example, there are a lot of descriptors that can help us as we're evaluating the music. And then I also give the students individual copies of that, and I'll be talking about how we use that when I get to tip number 4. Tip number 3 with assessment and feedback, be specific. If you just say, good job, it's not clear enough. You have to be specific about what was good about it. I love how you used faster air to get that high C on trumpet. Now that's a little bit more specific, and it lets them know what they were doing right. And sometimes you might need to let them know what they're doing wrong. So for example, you might tell the clarinets, pretend like you're trying to smile to get that note in tune. So I'm telling that to my clarinets a lot to get them to do that proper embouchure. Tip number 4 for assessment and feedback, record. This can be very painful to go back and listen to it, but it's a big learning experience because a lot of my middle schoolers, especially, their egos get shot down just a little bit. And they're like, is that what we really sound like? Yes, that's what you really sound like. That's why we're practicing it and working on it more. When we do this, that's when I put that large group rubric into effect. We talk through the whole thing and we talk about what each of the things mean when it talks about dynamics and balance and blend and articulation and note accuracy and all the things that it talks about. And I talk about what a 1 looks like and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 5. And then when we go back and listen to our recording, I'll have them fill out their own sheets. And then I also will, after they've all filled out their sheets, we go back and talk about it. And it's like, okay, on this particular aspect, on note accuracy, who gave us a 5? How many gave us a 4? How many gave us a 1? And it's very enlightening to see some of that. Most of the people are pretty close to what I would score it at. And we talk about why it's at that score, and then talk about what we can do to make that better. When you do this recording of the ensemble, mic placement is very important. I never did have the advantage of a mic that was hung in my room. And so I learned this the hard way. If I put the mic like near me as the conductor, it just the nature of the mic or something, it would just get too much of the front row, and it was really hard for us to give a good rating. So I usually like to place the mic behind the band, so in the back of the room, and as high up as I can get it. Sometimes it's just on a music stand that I've elevated it. Sometimes I have a way to hang it off of the wall, but that's what I have found works best when recording. You don't have to have anything fancy. You can record on your smartphone and then just have figured out how to get that to your playback device in your room. I never had all the latest technology with Bluetooth with my speaker systems, but I had ways that I figured out how to get that so we could play it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and give us a 5-star review.
The Music Ed Podcast, where you get quick and easy tips for how to be a better band teacher.